Good morning. Welcome to today's service. We are so glad you joined us. Now, Unity's 5 principles. There is only one presence and one power active as the universe and in my life, God the good. Our essence is of God. Therefore, we are inherently good. This God essence was fully expressed in Jesus the Christ. We are co-creators with God, creating reality through thoughts held in mind. Through prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind with God. Denials and affirmations are tools we use. Through thoughts, words, and actions, we live the truth we know. And today's daily word, inner peace. The peace of God fills my mind and my heart and my life. Quiet moments in a fragrant garden, a stroll by a lake or stream, or a visit to any place of beauty inspires a deep awareness of peace. I also enjoy peace in the company of friends, those with whom I have easy camaraderie and deep bonds. Growing in spiritual awareness, I claim inner peace wherever I am. True inner peace comes from deep within me. If I'm feeling less than peaceful, I pause and breathe out worry, fear, and unhealthy concerns. Giving my full attention to the divine presence within me, I breathe in peace that soothes my emotions, calms my thoughts, and relaxes my body. As I continue to inhale peace and exhale concern, I move forward with renewed clarity and confidence. The scripture for today is from Isaiah 26, verse 3. Those of steadfast mind you keep in peace because they trust in you. And we are very blessed to have Sandra Soley as our guest speaker today.
So I'm very grateful to be here this morning, to have an opportunity to connect heart to heart, and to have that awareness with you that in the realm of spirit, there is no limitation of time or space. So wherever you are, and whenever you tune into this time of sharing from Unity Spiritual Center in Bellingham, know that we are connected with you heart to heart. I'm grateful truly to be back here in this space. Some of you know and others do not. This was my home church. I first found Unity at Unity in Bellingham, and it was from this community that I went off to ministerial school in 1996. So it was such a gift to come back and to look around and see what's behind us here. It's like this is home in so many ways, having these beautiful trees behind us. And as I was contemplating on that at home, as I was getting ready to be here with you today, I thought about something that I had just learned fairly recently, and it's about the Japanese art of forest bathing. Their word for it is actually Shinrin-yoku. And it was in the 1980s, that this became very prominent in their culture. There was a lot of scientific work that was done to find out what is going on when people go into the forest, when they connect with the trees. And it's quite amazing to find that out and have it reach us. I actually first learned about it from Doctors David and Austin Perlmutter with their book, Brainwash, not as you think that word is, but to detox our minds for clearer thinking, deeper relationships, and lasting happiness. Doesn't that sound good? And what they were able to do is say, here's what happens. They brought together the scientific information to share with us. So, look out there, see the trees, and know it boosts your immune system. It actually helps build up your body's natural ability to destroy things that are destructive to it. It reduces your blood pressure. It heightens your ability to deal with stress. It improves mood. It increases our mindfulness. It increases our ability to focus. Even with children with ADHD, they're finding it helps them focus. And it accelerates recovery from illnesses and from surgeries, and it even improves sleep. So I'm going to invite you right now to just take a moment with me, and some of you, this is your memory and your sense and your consciousness of being home is with these trees that you see behind me. Others may not have that same awareness, but I invite each one of you to take a moment and be aware for yourself of a time that you have been in the trees, been in the forest. Maybe you have a particular special place in mind. And I invite you to just take a moment to move into that awareness and just feel it, smell it, know it. And in that, as we allow that, as we open up to it, I just invite you to stay with it and to be aware that always you can take a moment, you can take a break, and you can go and connect in with that deep world of nature that feeds and nourishes all of us. For what we know and claim in unity is that God is always present, everywhere present, and that presence is something that is good, that is nourishing, that heals us, that in all ways allows us to be interconnected with each other and with our world. So take a moment, do that for yourself. You know, it's interesting, I loved the Daily Word presentation today, and I have to confess to not having connected in with it personally this morning. And didn't look ahead, see what it was, but it is exactly what I want to share today. So really, you've presented what I want to communicate, and that is that these unity principles transform our lives. And they are guideposts, they are anchors that we can use to handle whatever is going on. You know, when I first came to Unity, I got one of the anchors of Unity's 5 principles with a guest speaker that was here. And he was only here one evening. I have no idea, I have to confess to not remembering who he was. But he said something that connected in with me, and that's what happens. That light of God within us goes, there, pay attention to this. Pay attention. When what he was talking about, he simply said, and it was like, whoa, he said, worry is praying for what you don't want. And he repeated it several times. It's like, whoa, worry's praying for what I don't want? But it was there, it had connected in with me somewhere, and I thought, well, I don't worry a lot. And then I began to observe, and that's what we do with our unity principles, we pay attention. Does this, and if something is spiritual truth, it begins to work in us. And I would catch myself. Something would be happening in my own life, in my family, in the world, and I would start worrying about it. And then I would hear him saying, worry's praying for what you don't want. And I would choose again. I knew I had to choose again. I did not want to be perpetuating something that was not good. And so it became this anchor for me that really was amazingly transformative. We often, all of us, are not paying a lot of attention to what are the ongoing thoughts that are happening in our heads. And what we all know is that right now we're living in what are challenging times. They really, truly are. And yet, challenging times are always opportunity times. And there are especially times that call us to apply our unity principles. Take them into our lives and live them in a more deeply way. And so what I want to do is just talk to you a little bit about how we can take these very ideas and start to anchor them in such a way that we can deal with whatever's going on, whether it's out there or whether it's right here next to us or it's some big change that personally we're having to go through. So let's start out with the very beginning of it. And part of that I kind of want to proceed with, not quite in our unity principles, but it's really there. And I first heard, again, in unity, and that was someone saying, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that, too, was something that I pondered. It's like, how does that change things? How is that different for me if I begin to think about it in that way? And what began to evolve for me, and I began to realize with it, is if I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, then what is this about? Why am I having how did I choose to come in and have a human experience? I'm a spiritual being, and I just wondered and worked with that inside. And it became another anchor place for me to put things in a larger context. That it's not just about me, it's not just about what's happening in my physical world, but in truth, we've got to all be spiritual beings having a human experience. And so it connected me with a sense, and does connect me with a sense of the larger whole. Recently, I ran across Buddhist nun that so many of us honor, Pema Chodron. And it was a quote, you can look it up online, her saying that very same thing. Perhaps that's where it originally came from and I heard it, I don't know. But she said very clearly, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And there's more to her quote. Because she went on to say, and infinite love is the only truth. Everything else is illusion. It's like, I don't know about you, but when I came into unity, and I still can get caught in many illusions. We all do. And yet we have this sense that I know spiritual truth somehow, or I have this great understanding somehow. I'm a part of a whole. So let's just take a minute and say, okay, so we're dealing with challenges right now, and let's just pick one of them, the coronavirus. Okay, it's like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this and use my unity principles? Well, the first one says there's only one presence and one power that's active in the universe and in our lives, and that God is good. So And it moves right on into the second one, how our essence is of God, and therefore we're inherently good. So God's good, everywhere present, I'm good. And that goodness was fully expressed in Jesus, the Christ. Well, in unity, we open up to Jesus is a way shower for us, for each one of us, in terms of how to live our lives, how to do things. He was totally aware of his oneness. And he tried to teach that to others. But his disciples wanted clear directions, how to do this. And so I'm going to pick up my Bible. And before I even say anything from it, I'm going to say thank you. You might not know that, but Unity of Bellingham, when I was ordained, sent me this Bible. So inside here it says, gift from all of you. Yeah? So it has traveled with me through almost 20 years of ministry, over in Yakima and Sedona, down in California, and now I'm back up here. And I'm going to turn to him, Jesus answering his disciples when they were like saying, what is this? You know, give us some clear direction. And I'm sharing from the book of Mark, chapter 12, and the verses 28 on down to 31. Actually, it says one of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. You ever think about that? Spiritual people would be disputing with one another? Yeah. And seeing that, he answered them well, and he asked Jesus, what commandment is the first of all? And Jesus answered, the first is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. The Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then verse 31, he goes on and says, the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There are no other commandments greater than these. Wow. As you think about it, as I think about it, and I'm thinking how to apply these unity principles in my life, what I'm hearing from Jesus is the way to work with those connections. He's saying what many of the mystics say, which is God is love. It's about love. It's about connecting from love. And he's letting us all know that we have it within us. We have the ability to connect with the love of God. We have the ability to treat everybody else with that consciousness. Everybody else. Because everybody, in a sense, is our neighbor, and yet the directions say treating our neighbor as ourselves. So it even tells us we have to be loving with ourselves. So there's some guidance that we can really take and live from, because it anchors us in moving away from fear, moving away from worry, and anchoring ourselves in a spiritual truth. That spark of divinity that is within us is truly a spark of love. And that spark of love is everywhere present. Mother Teresa used to say every day she had an opportunity to connect with Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises. So as we're thinking about challenges, as we're thinking about places and things and situations that we don't want to love, we don't want to care about, it's like, wait a minute. The appearances may be distressing. The appearance of coronavirus is distressing. And yet, when we open up to the awareness that the presence and the activity of God is with us and moves in and through all things, and that we are, as our third principle says, co-creators with God. And I want to define that for you a little bit, because it's not co-creators as in separate from God, but it's coming into that awareness, that spark of love that's in me, that's also in you. It's all part of the one. It's all part of the infinite consciousness and the energy of the divine that's everywhere present, and that is all, we're all being drawn by this to move through our challenges and our difficulties to higher ground, to being able to do what in unity we call holding the high watch, which is aligning with God consciousness and knowing it's within us, that spark of light lives in us. So one of the things to move into that consciousness about is that another way of thinking is that an understanding is, of course, we realize Christ was not Jesus' last name. It's a title. It's an acknowledgement of that light of the divine that is in him and that is also in all of us. And so there is that spark we might think about as being the indwelling Christ. Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, was absolutely anchored in that awareness. He used to say all the time, the scripture from Colossians 1:27, Christ in you, the hope of glory. That recognition that it's in there, within each and every one of us. In fact, James Dillard Freeman, in his book of Story of Unity, tells about at the very end of his life, and Charles was 93 years old, and he was finally just resting in that place of getting near his transition time. And a woman friend came to connect with him, to give her goodbyes. And he said to her, so what is the greatest teaching that has ever been given? And she said she didn't quite know. And of course, what Charles had to say was, Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's in there. It's within each and every one of us. And to come to know that whatever the outer circumstances, our call is to align and use our principles. So for instance, taking it right now with this challenge that we're all living through of the coronavirus. And to say, okay, there's one power, it's everywhere present, and I have a spark of that within me, so does everybody else. So how can I be a part of helping myself to awaken, helping others to awaken, to deal with this in such a way that I'm not coming from fear, I'm not coming from worry and praying for what I don't want, but I'm also being wise. I'm being discerning. I'm paying attention. And so what we do is we go to that fourth principle of prayer and meditation and align ourselves with God and move into that place of asking for our guidance and paying attention to, following the way of support for ourselves, for each other. We're doing it here in spiritual community by Zooming our meetings, our Sunday services, rather than everybody gathering. We're doing our part to be a part of the healing of the whole. And we're recognizing that somehow we know not how, because we're spiritual beings, having this human experience, there is some way, because the goodness of God is always present, moving in and through all things, there is some way that there are things for each one of us to learn, to grow, to understand. And so I invite you to think about that for yourself. What is it in your experience of adapting to this coronavirus life that we're all living that you are somehow growing in spiritual understanding? Because we find that when we look for it. We find that when we set it as something that we value. It's like, what is that? I'll give you just a little brief one from me, and that is that in the midst of doing ministry, there's a lot of demands about ministry. And one of the things that would happen in the midst of it is like, I wish I just had some time to just be with my own spiritual growth and transformation. You know, just not be in this place of doing it and for everybody else. And of course, I'm always doing it for me, and it's always there, but it was the busyness of all that had to happen. And so we moved up here, my husband and I together, and had plans about what was going to happen in our lives. And it turned out he got a diagnosis of a terminal illness, and we went through a year of knowing that before he finally made his transition. And I had thought for myself, it's like, okay, I'm going to deal with all of this that's going on. And at the end of kind of this year of mourning and taking care of all this, I'm going to be able to I had all these visions and ideas about going out and doing things and traveling and whatever. And the virus showed up. It's like, whoa. And I got into my little bit of worry and worked with letting go of that. And I got in a little bit of being maybe depressed about it. I kind of thought about it a little bit. And then this light bulb came on. And the light bulb was that when we had moved into our new house, I had named our Wi-Fi Sanctuary. And it was like, oh my gosh, here is my sanctuary time. This is what I longed for. This is what I put out into the universe of wanting, and here it is. And I've got my home, I've got a beautiful garden to be a part of. It's like, this is my sanctuary time. I don't know what it is for you, but what I want to call you into is embrace those unity principles. Take hold of them and start to look at how do they apply in your life. And let go, I invite you very much, let go of being so resistant to what is and open up to that we are co-creators, all of us together. So what we're seeing out in our larger world is something that we have together been co-creators with. And we co-create things toward the good. We also bring things up that have a need for healing. They come up to be revealed so that we can grow in spiritual understanding and transform them. So if instead of resisting what's out there, you move into, I'm a co-creator with this. I'm a part of creating our coronavirus experience. I'm a part of learning how to handle things well and be loving and find the gifts. I'm a part of holding the high watch and holding in prayer the scientists that are working so hard. I have a dear friend who's a nurse. Marguerite is her first name, and she is one of these nurses that travels. And so she has been to New York working with the coronavirus patients. She's been down in South Texas working with the patients. She's now assigned elsewhere to be doing the same kind of work. She is an amazing Unity Truth student. And to connect with her and be aware of her journey, even with her own conditions that are underlying, there for her, to know that she is doing the work that she needs to do to take care of herself and honoring everybody else, honoring those patients, the people in the hospital, supporting them 100% with their healing, but also she has a tremendous hospice consciousness from having lost her husband some years ago and pursued that kind of work. And so she says she also recognizes when some of the patients are getting ready to make their transition back into the realm of spirit. And she is able to then hold that consciousness with them from a place of love and acceptance. And that's really what we're all on the journey to do. We're all on the journey to learn from each other. We're all on the journey to live the spiritual truths we are learning, to grow in spiritual understanding, and to be a part of taking the actions that we are guided from within to take and do. So I don't know what it is for you, but you will know, because that spark, that light of God, that indwelling Christ in you is always unique in tuning in the way that is perfect for you, to have your light bulb moments, to have your recognitions, to have your understandings. So honoring where we are, not resisting it, but embracing it and saying, okay, I'm on a spiritual journey and I am growing in spiritual understanding. So I am open and receptive, God. Guide me and show the way. So I invite you to do some forest bathing this week. I invite you to embrace those unity principles. And the last thing I want to invite you into, which is within unity we know, prayer and meditation transforms our lives. So if you're not aware, our Unity World Day of Prayer is coming up. It is always the second Thursday of the month, so it will be on September 10th. And what happens with that is they too are responding to the virus that is happening, so it's all going to be done virtually. So you can experience that. You can still send in your prayers to them. You can be there and listen and watch and connect in with the meetings and the prayers that happen with that, and allow that affirmation to be with you. And I just want to give it to you so that you can anchor yourself in it already. I want to close with that affirmation from World Day of Prayer, which they are holding, standing in truth. I move from fear to faith. Standing in truth. I move from fear to faith. I see that and claim it and know it with and for you as we continue on our spiritual journeys and align with the truth of God that lives within. God bless.
And now our prosperity affirmation. And before I state it, I want to also give a big thank you to all who support Unity of Bellingham. And if you wish to send a love offering, information on how to donate is at the end of this video. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And the prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. I am the light of God. I am the love of God. I am the power of God. I am the presence of God. Wherever I am, God is, and all is well. I am.